Hello everyone, I'm Greg Otta with FedScoop TV, and we're here at the Data Innovation Summit today, and I'm talking with Dr. David Bray, the CIO of the FCC. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So, open data, big data, open government, enterprise agility, a lot of buzzwords thrown around in the public sector. Is it significant as far as the progress that you see, or do you think that it's just a lot of noise?
I think it's probably signs of actually a lot of progress is happening behind the scenes.
Okay.
I think what we need to do is much more share the stories of both what's going on behind the scenes and also what's available for the public. I look at it that really government does three things. One, it maintains its operations internally, and the fact that we can do new data analytics and we can do new approaches to data that we couldn't in the past allows us to change how we do those data analytics. Second, it interacts with the public. In fact, that's usually why we're here, is interact with the public in some form. And so making it easier for the public to actually have a sense of what data is available to them, make it easier for them to remix. As an example of the FCC, we have the National Broadband Map, and that's an example of data that the public can actually look and reuse. And in fact, we see a lot of private sector companies using that data to actually inform and actually provide services as well to the public. And then the third is actually sort of almost the B2B or G2B.
Okay.
So it's the idea that also, in addition to the public, we also serve other private sector agencies, we serve other stakeholders, and we also serve international governments as well. So really thinking about how do we engage both the public, but then also those other stakeholders that might be specialized groups that all play a role in the larger ecosystem to support the public.
So data innovation, or innovation in general, has a lot to do with culture change as well as technology. I know you've talked about with respect to public service, it being sort of a partnership between the public, government enterprises, and sort of like a public-private partnership.
Right.
So in your opinion, where does public service sit as far as the culture change when it comes to data?
Great question. So I think oftentimes I try to think about what's the big difference between the private sector and the public sector, because I think there's actually not a lot of big differences, especially when you look at large organizations. The one thing I would say that's different about the public sector is at the end of the day, we're here to try and protect privacy, protect civil liberties as best we can. And that's something that may not be on the mantles of what a corporation needs to do. And so with data, because there is a potential with data where we need to be very cautious and protective of privacy and civil liberties, we need to be aware of what analytics the public wants us to do, as well as have discussions about them as to the transparency and what they actually will give consent to do. And so at the FCC, when we did the FCC speed test app, one, we made it open source, so you could actually see what the code was doing, and two, you only downloaded it by consent.
Right.
And for a while, it was actually the most downloaded out, right behind Google Chrome. But that said, I think that's something that government as a whole is actually sort of grasping this, particularly in representative democracies, because other than maybe the people here at this conference and maybe 10 or 15% of the population, I don't think most of the population wants to dive into data analytics and correlations and everything like that. But how do we have this discussion? Because it is so key to what we do as a nation and how we actually deal with the data. Because if we don't get ahead of the curve, we really will be drowning in data. The public will say, well, why isn't it easier to do this? They'll expect the things they see in the private sector. But the same day, I hope that we do have the checks and balances maintained as we go into this exponential area of data.
How do you see, with respect to data, sort of that integrating with the movement towards mobile and the impact that it has on public service delivery?
I think mobile is very key. I think it's an example of actually shifting away from what we did in the 1990s, which was much more the application-centric model,
okay,
and going much more to a data-centric model.
Right.
And that's a data-centric model that allows us to do mobile apps, whatever comes next after mobile maps. I'm sure we'll actually probably have a way of actually doing Google Glasses,
okay,
wearable devices, and really just thinking about whatever type of interface we're doing. The average app really only lasts about 5 months on the iOS store before it's discarded. And so whatever we're producing as a UI, that'll come and go. And in fact, there may even be examples that I actually was recently in Taiwan on an Eisenhower Fellowship.
Okay.
There's actually 9,000 people that have day jobs, but they spend their weekends and nights voluntarily writing code to make UIs for government websites better.
Okay.
We don't have that in the United States right now. I don't know if we're that hungry as it is. But given it's a nation of 24 million, it's quite impressive. And then they make the code open source, and then government chooses to use it or not. So I think about it as really, if we shift to a more data-centric model, that will allow us to have those questions about what data do we share, what data do we even collect, what things protect privacy, how do we protect privacy, and then allow user interfaces not just to be built by government, but also built by the private sector as well as the public to serve them best.
So looking forward, where do you see future generations moving into this sort of data-centric atmosphere? What expertise will be needed? besides people volunteering to write code for the government, and new ways agencies can work together, sort of the interoperability between the data?
If I could have one hope for the next 10 years, it's that we begin to experiment with the idea that you're not assigned to a specific role. If you think about it, in the private sector, there's often examples where you can float across different parts of the organization that you're with. And I recognize in the past it made sense because HR departments were mainly manual and paper-based. But now I'd love it if actually you were recruited for public service and you actually were allowed to almost be like a freelancer on the inside. And maybe for the first 6 months you're assigned to a place to develop your skills, get to understand that place. But then if later you develop a reputation for being really good at doing advanced data analytics with predictive analyses, if another place needs that, it's not that you have to wait, go through USA Jobs to go there. If there's available, it's almost like as long as you have billable hours across the government, it's something you could do. And that would allow us to actually have more of a reputation-based tracking of what the good efforts are going on in public service, and then allow people to actually self-organize. As myself as a supervisor, that would also allow me to actually put on the inside, just like we do on the outside, we could have these challenges and say, is there anyone that actually could come up with a solution to solve the following that would allow both the X side and see what the public does, but also allow those professionals on the inside to say, well, I'll take this piece from Census, I'll take this piece from maybe Department of Justice, and remixing things that have already been done, I can get your solution at 1/6 the cost. And so I think that idea of a freelancer group is really an interesting way to think about how do we actually approach both the need for talent, but the interesting too is also shows, there's interesting this study, if you wear multiple hats, you're happier than if you wear just one hat.
Right.
And so that may be a way of motivating people.
Great. Always great to pick your mind about this stuff, David. Thanks for joining us
Thanks for having me, Greg.
For all of our YouTube videos, you can check out our YouTube channel. And for more information, check out fedscoop.com. I'm Greg Otto. Thanks for watching.